Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, back for another episode, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have with me Cristina DiGiacomo. Cristina, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Tom. Thank you so much for having me.
Cristina, you have one of the most interesting academic and professional backgrounds of someone I've interviewed for a podcast generally on compliance. So, with that, why don't you tell us about your academic background?
Absolutely. My academic background is in communications and business with a master's in organizational change management. But for the past 14 years, I've been studying philosophy and applying philosophical concepts to the workplace environment. My core competency at this point is really around practical philosophy.
So I work in what's generally called the compliance space, sometimes called the compliance and ethics space, and sometimes we actually talk about ethics, although not nearly as much as we should. Occasionally I'll meet an ethicist at one of the compliance conferences, and I'm always fascinated, one, because of the different academic perspectives, but two, it's the application of what many think is an erudite topic to the business world. But it sounds like you've played in that space for a long time.
It's really interesting because philosophy is around us every day, all the time. We just don't really see it. Anytime we come up with a decision on what to do, we go through a set of philosophical principles or concepts or moral ideas based on what we think is the right thing to do in that particular moment, given the circumstances. My belief is that everyone has the capacity for philosophical thinking, and we see it play out every day in our personal lives, in our work lives. And I do believe that people strive to be ethical people or strive to behave ethically. But a lot of times we just don't even realize that's what we're doing. And so what I love about philosophy is that we actually practice it all the time, but we're not exactly aware of it.
So in my own journey, I would certainly take the work I do now at least back to Plato. And one of my favorite stories, The Parable of the Cave. Do you take it that far back or even further?
I love Plato. I actually have 2 volumes of all of his works that have been newly translated. And my favorite work of his is actually The Laws, which is, I personally feel, is his masterpiece. He wrote it after the Republic. The allegory of the cave is really interesting because it's so useful. I mean, if you really think about just in general, the story of the allegory is really around people who are imprisoned with these ideas of what they think reality or the truth is. And actually, it is revealed that everything that they see, there's a whole other enlightened and truthful space outside of this cave that they've been living in that is more revealing and enlightening and is a path to their freedom. So yeah, I definitely lean on the Greeks, but I even go further back to Indian philosophy or Asian philosophy, the Tao, pre-Western ideas, as far back as what we have humanly recorded. A lot of the reason for my breadth of knowledge with regards to philosophy is a lot of these principles that have lasted for so long have lasted for a reason. They've lasted because people continue to refer to them, people continue to practice them, people continue to imbue these ideas in their cultures, in their norms. And so if something is that universal and that pure of a principle and it lasts that long, then it's worthy of using it in our modern lives. So ancient wisdom is very applicable to modern life.
So the furthest I've been able to go back and draw inspiration from directly for the compliance and ethics world is the Saga of Gilgamesh. And I've also studied that in the context of comparisons with the flood story or other stories from the Bible. But you hit on something that I think is incredibly important, and that's these universal truths. So now I want to maybe bring us forward a little bit, because you have been applying some of those universal truths professionally over your past career, but it leads directly to what you were talking to us about today and now from a business perspective, and that's 10 plus 1. So could we move to 10 plus 1? And you start off by telling the audience, what is 10 plus 1 and why is it so important for us in 2025 and into 2026?
Absolutely. Thank you. So the 10 plus 1 is a moral code for us as people in how we interact with artificial intelligence. So it's our set of commandments for the AI age, a moral code for the machine age. And how I came up with it, there's a little bit of a backstory, because I think it's almost important to understand the climate and the circumstances with which this came out of, because I think it's relevant as people are really trying to navigate this new age that we're in, AI now for the past 2 or 3 years. What was happening about a year out after ChatGPT became mass market is all the great thinkers in the AI space were having very conflicting views around what AI meant for us. There were some thinkers who felt that it was to our detriment to continue down this path. And there were other thinkers who felt that this could be the technology that elevates us and saves us and helps us solve problems we haven't been able to really solve. But what I was noticing, because as a philosopher who cares very much about how people think about how they think, I noticed that there was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of fear, and people really didn't understand or know exactly which school of thought to embrace. And that was very frustrating for me, because I felt that there was a better way. And I realized that we needed something to all rally around and coalesce around as an idea to help us approach using AI, what we were doing to it and what we were doing with it. And based on my knowledge of how historically people have gathered around a new idea, whether it was a new religion, an evolution, a revolution, a new technology, there was always a set of principles or commandments that were generated, that were universal, and that people could understand. And I realized as human beings, we needed a new set of commandments for AI. And so I sat down and I wrote the 10 plus 1 commandments of human AI coexistence. And these are a set of principles for anyone, really, whether you're a business leader, a policymaker, whether you're an individual user, that if you follow these principles, the chances of you being in an ethical position are much higher than if you were to just kind of go about things on your own or wait for regulations and policies to sort themselves out in order for you to follow. It's a much more proactive approach to responsible AI.
So I've heard you speak about this before, which led to us being introduced, or at least reaching out to each other. And when you went through them, I just thought, this is what compliance officers need. And this is what the corporate world needs. And I'm not sure you thought of that when you developed this. Perhaps you hoped that you could move into the corporate world. But how did you see this being used beyond simply Tom Fox utilizing these 10 principles, how I might interact? But can we build a framework that actually we can use in a corporate world or a compliance world?
Sure. And I think if you allow me, Tom, I'll just list what these are so your audience can get a sense of what the 10 plus 1 actually is. Yeah. So starting with commandment number 1, own AI's outcomes. Number 2, do not destroy to advance. Number 3, do not manipulate AI. Number 4, never use AI for conflict. Number 5, be honest with AI. Number 6, respect AI's limits. Number 7, allow AI to improve. Number 8, evolve together. Number 9, honor human virtues. Number 10, honor and care for potential sentience. And number 11, the 10 plus 1, is be the steward, not the master. And so the idea here was to create something that was really at a very high level, right? That felt like commandments, right? That felt big enough that then could be adopted in different contexts, whether, as I said, whether it's in a policy context or a business context. The reason why I'm now cascading this down into the business sector is because I think that this is where AI is having the most impact at the moment. Not so much when it comes to reaching people, when it comes to people actually being more of an end user of AI, is really happening in the business context. And so that for me is the very first target. And within that, what I've been seeing and what I'm getting a lot of feedback from chief information security officers and CTOs and CAIOs and as well as CCOs is that this is language that they can use that makes sense, that they can go to their leadership or the people that are in their employ and actually have a conversation around, okay, are we following these principles? And it's a way for a conversation to start, but also to begin the process of aligning the work in the organization along these principles. And I could go on in terms of how these principles, how the 10 plus 1 supports and enables responsible AI versus a regulatory framework or a compliance framework. But that's essentially the idea. I didn't set out necessarily for this to become a business. I'm having business people and business leaders come to me and say, this is so useful. And so I'm just rolling with it.
I'm certainly one of those folks, because I would say the biggest struggle right now in the corporate world is not using AI, but it's governing the use of AI. And I think what you have given us is a governance framework, or at least a way, as you said, to start that conversation so we can put principles in place to help us guide this. But then the unique thing that I think that you bring to the table, Cristina, is your philosophical background. And we're probably going to go through these philosophically at some point, one by one. So I'll just alert you to that. But you're able to bring that, and then I'll overlay that compliance and ethics. Now we can have an ethical discussion about the use of AI in a way that we can actually frame the governance issues, and we can put that framework in place, literally from the board of directors to senior management to the officers in charge, and push it down to the employees so they can see, here are the principles that we're going to be guiding by. Does any of that resonate, or am I just way too off base?
Not at all. You're on base, Tom. You're on base. Okay. Absolutely. I specifically wrote these so that anyone can actually see their organization in it or see themselves in it, whether as a developer, as someone who's responsible for AI governance. These are meant to be high level and universal, but also perpetual. So I'm not thinking a quarter ahead or a year ahead. I'm thinking 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead. I want organizations to feel confident that there's a longevity here, because what's happening is laws are changing, but risk doesn't. The risk is going to stay the same because we're involved, right? It's us, and we're the ones who are impacted by it. So to the extent that implications are fairly universal, that means the risk is universal. That means there's basically going to be the same risk that any organization takes on. But the laws around and the external environment around how organizations are approaching this is constantly shifting. There's a level of volatility here that is unprecedented when it comes to AI regulation, compliance, and governance. But the risk stays the same. And so we needed something that addresses the risk, that is portable, that is perpetual, because principles are universal and don't change.
So the principles are universal and don't change. I don't think we ever say that in business. What also intrigues me is your recognition of the dynamicism or the dynamic nature of this in the context of risk. And that's because we have both